And just like that, we have our next guest with us, Mr. Ruter. Is it Ruter?
It is Ruter, yes. Not
Yes.
rudder. It is Ruter.
Well, I mean, I saw one T, so I was not going to say rudder.
25% of the time, it's people say rudder and they're wrong.
Oh my God. Do you let them know that grammar exists?
Well,
You
I mean, there's different who knows all the rules, for you don't know. It could be a name
I,
from another I mean, Henry, just by reading the name.
yeah, I will say this. It is spelled with an I, but I remind people later, it's like, hey, I respond to it, I understand, but it's actually Henri. But that's totally fine. Speaking of I's, I have to publicly apologize. Folks, I keep whenever I'll be on socials or typing stuff out, I'll type in Weston and the computer will just go Weston, Westin. And I'm not looking and I'll press enter and it's actually ON. So I have to apologize, Weston, for that.
No worries,
You
no
know,
worries. It
uh,
helps, I don't know about the name Westin with an I, but at least Weston, my
yeah.
name, Weston. I mean, it's pronounced the same, but, it comes from West Town.
Oh, okay. All
That's
right.
the way to
I,
remember.
I didn't realize that. The best part is that, the I is next to the O on the keyboard, which makes it even more just frustrating almost because you're like, what? I'm pretty sure I did that. Oh, no, it's a autocorrect. Anyhow, enough about that. Um, Weston, thank you for joining us. Welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you on the stream today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, by all means, I think it was absolutely essential to have you. But Felix brought your name up a few times, and I was just like, okay, well, I mean, I think you remember, you might have been in the chat. I was like, "Oh, the EV guy. Okay, cool. I'm gonna reach out." But let's get back to, our discussions for today. So first of all, as I mentioned to you, previously, I really want, my guests to sort of like to be in total control simply because, it's some of their work that they wanna talk about, and that's why I brought you here. Now, ultimately, I'm basically handing over, the keys. You're going to be the driver, and we're going to start like that. So let's get into you essentially, who you are, where you work, and we'll go onwards after.
Yeah, I live in Portland, Oregon with my wife, 2 boys, and now 2 cats. I I worked at Google for 6.5 years, and then in just let's see, I guess it's been almost a month ago, I started at WP Engine, and I have been working in the performance space since, well, I guess around 2018. That's when I was really starting to focus on that. And or no, I guess it would have been 2016.
Cool. So you said that you were at Google, now you're at WP Engine. When you were at Google, was this part of, is it called Galaxy as well?
Yes.
So you're on the Galaxy team as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the scaled activation team, so we can be able to realize large improvements across the web through content management systems, and specifically WordPress because it's the largest by far. And
Mhm.
within the Chrome team, there's the top-down improvements to performance through the Chrome browser itself, but then there's only so far that the Chrome browser can go, and there needs to be the bottom up to meet halfway
Mhm.
to have web pages built with best practices so that they can leverage all the performance benefits that the browser provides. So that's we were working on the bottom up aspect of things.
Got it, got it. Now, did you have, going into, when joining Galaxy and working on that aspect of performance, specifically with WordPress, did you have WordPress experience prior to, joining? Like, had you been working in that ecosystem already?
Yeah, that's why I was hired because I have been working in WordPress for oh, well, let's see, that was 2018, so over 10 years professionally, but then 15 years just as a user. And then I joined with other core committers, contributors, and we at that time I was focused on well, previously to Google, I was working at XWP, a WordPress agency. There, I was working with Google before I joined Google on the AMP project,
Mm.
bringing AMP pages to WordPress in a way that required the minimum amount of user knowledge and know-how to be able to have valid AMP pages. So that's kind of how I got started, both at Google and in performance was through the AMP project.
Wow. I feel like Felix mentioned the same, sort of like AMP exposed them to performance a bit. So now you've gone from Google to WP Engine. If you can just sort of share the role there, are you going to be, looking after performance there as well?
Yes, was at Google. I was sponsored to work on the WordPress Core Performance team,
Mhm.
and now at WP Engine, I am doing the same. So we are um, continuing to drive forward the performance initiatives that will well make WordPress faster and the web faster for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, WP Engine kind of came in where, Google walked out kind of thing. Like you're on like the WP Engine Galaxy team.
Yeah, contributor team. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, WP Engine, I'm sure you're not the only person there who's interested or looks after performance. What is the climate there when it comes to WordPress and performance?
Well, I'm new to the company,
Oh,
so I can't
okay.
give you a definitive answer, but
Got it.
definitely. I mean, WordPress is the it's a WordPress hosting company, and
Mhm,
performance is one of their primary like value offerings, scalability and performance, speed.
mhm,
So, um, having a fast WordPress core is very important for the business, but it also benefits competitors and the web as a whole. So it's a kind of a win-win situation.
I know you touched on it a bit, but this is something that I like to ask each and every guest as well. What their first memory was when it came to performance, and when they essentially said, "Okay, I think I'm going to really pay attention to this space," and when you sort of considered yourself like, "Yes, I work in performance now."
Well, I guess I would bring it back to working on the AMP project and
Mm,
with WordPress mission is to democratize publishing.
mhm,
And to me, at the time, my mission or goal was to democratize performance and to make it accessible to anybody who may not be technical.
mhm,
And I was aware of best practices, some at least at that time for performance, but then I realized that it's an important thing to have a good experience. So why is this not more of a focus of what I'm, invested in and I enjoy finding, you know, performance issues and fixing them and finding ways to automate those fixes so that others wouldn't have to do it on their own or manually every time. So
mhm.
I suppose that's how I got started. Yeah.
Now, let's fast forward that, and the core web performance team is for WordPress is assembled. I think it would have been about 3 years by now, and you're now sort of like working with people like Felix and others that might be out there, and you're making um, contributions to core that are having impact. And some of that you actually discussed kind of recently over at WordCamp US that was in your backyard, which must have been pretty awesome. But this is something that actually caught my eye because when during the presentation that you had sort of reshared, you really talked about some of these benchmarks that I thought were super duper interesting. And that's why I essentially reached out. I was like, hey, would you like to sort of like have a conversation about this work and specifically some of these benchmarks?
Yeah. Well, in the core performance team, we develop performance improvements to WordPress core itself by committing things directly into core, but it's often premature or difficult to land something maybe so massive in just a single go. And oftentimes every time really, a new feature benefits from having testers and having them perhaps test things over the course of many releases, not just in the course of a single release cycle. So we have this plugin called Performance Lab,
Mhm.
which is a suite of performance plugins that are each tailored to work on a specific performance area in WordPress core. And we have plugins that will, convert your uploaded JPEG to an AVIF or WebP, for example, or implement speculation rules API, or, things like that. We develop these plugins as features. They're called feature plugins in the WordPress uh, project, and they then are promoted through the Performance Lab plugin.
Mm.
And when a new feature comes out, there's a little notice that pops up now that will say, hey, we have a new feature to try out. And then the Performance Lab plugin itself, when you're in the WordPress dashboard, it will be prominently displayed. So it has a, a few 100,000 installs. So it has a good reach. So then, yeah, we deploy those out, or we make those plugins available. And then each plugin includes a meta tag in the page so that when we crawl and query pages in HTTP archive, it will we'll be able to see which plugins are active on that page to then start to get some like field data from, or I guess lab data in that case, from actual sites using the plugins to see the performance impact that they have, and then cross-referencing that with data from Crux to see the actual field data. So that's how we've measured things in the past and continue to do so. And but then also, which I did in my talk, was to look at uh, benchmarking specific performance improvements in the plugins themselves, just in a simulated environment on my system, with along with Puppeteer's emulation for network conditions and for CPU throttling and things like that. And then that was a way that it's easier to, of course, obtain metrics when you're on your own system, not relying on Chrome to provide that data after a month.
Yeah, exactly. Let's kind of move into that conversation you had over at WordCamp US. And here we go. So, this is basically the blog post that you published probably at the same time or shortly after your talk. So, I'll let you sort of like go through it and talk about exactly, or, in however terms that you want to talk about like what this blog post referenced, and we'll get into also these benchmarks that you shared over at WordCamp US in Portland, Oregon.
Yes. Yeah, so I just shared a link to this blog post as well in the comments. But this blog post, I in the process of writing my talk, I first made an outline, and then I made slides, and then I took that and put that in the blog post, and then everything that I wanted to say in the talk but didn't have time for, I put in the blog post. So basically, the blog post is like 10 times more information than I had time for in the talk, with a lot more details, and it was a way for me to not worry about missing something, because I could just say, "Hey, go check out the blog post," or if somebody missed something during the talk, they can read the blog post if they didn't want to rewatch the video. But this blog post also includes the a recording of the talk as well with the slides. But then after all that, it gets into the meat of the content. So um, basically, I wanted to show with the Performance Lab feature plugins what the actual performance impact of each one was relatively to whether it is enabled or disabled. And I wanted to do that using the default theme in WordPress Core, the current one, 2025, because themes can basically do anything. And it is difficult to always know what, I mean, because I could do anything, then I didn't want to like get distracted by what a theme is doing well or is not doing well. And then the core themes generally are built in a way that they already implement the best practices for performance. They or in the large part. So I wanted to use the most recent core theme. Um, and obviously there are other themes in the ecosystem that do implement best practices as well. But I just wanted to focus on WordPress, stock WordPress out of the box with the default theme, what the performance impact was for these feature plugins. And the what I used is a combination of lighthouse audits, lighthouse results, as well as a tool that I worked on at Google called this benchmark, or it's inside of WPP research. It's called Benchmark Web Vitals, and it allows you to obtain the core web vitals for any number of URLs for any number of um, iterations, and then get the median value of the metric. And this is important because, as you know, there's a lot of variability in a given web page load. And so, because of the CPU or the network conditions or anything.
Yeah.
And so, in order to know what the actual performance impact was for a enhancement, it's important to get like 50 requests, 50 page loads with the plugin active, 50 page loads with the plugin deactivated, and then to look at the percentage improvement in the LCP or in the raw millisecond relative improvement. So that's what this command does. And then it outputs a table like this where you can see the raw numbers before and after, and then a relative difference in the milliseconds or the percentages. So with that, with those, I guess, testing methodology, then I went through and started looking at, well, here's some additional background information about LCP elements but the WordPress core for the core web vitals of the largest contentful paint, cumulative layout shift, and interaction to next paint, WordPress struggles the most with LCP by far. So all of the plugins that, for the most part, almost all the plugins focus on improving LCP in WordPress because that's where WordPress struggles the most. So those are that's what I'm going to focus on. That's what I focused on in my talk. And the first one, let's see if I can get the list. So these are the plugins here specifically that I looked at. And then there was some additional ones that are the beyond part of the talk. One of the first one was the image placeholders plugin, and that it adds you can see here, a solid background color to an image before the image loads. And as a user, you would think, oh, that's going to make the LCP much better because there's something there at the very beginning. But in reality, there's no difference at all in LCP. I mean, even here, a short or a very tiny regression in the LCP. So this plugin is in Performance Lab, I think, because we didn't at the time have solid measurements for the performance impact and whether it would improve things. But regardless of that, there is a definite user experience improvement to having a a dominant background color, a loading indicator for content on the page. And since it doesn't really hurt performance and it improves the user experience, then it's still featured in Performance Lab. But this will also relate later to, I'll just say now, with the speculation rules. When you enable the pre-render mode, when you navigate to another link on the page, it can be an instant experience. Like there's no it can be loaded instantly.
Mhm.
And that is kind of jarring, at least for me, because I'm habituated to expect there to be, the spinner and the tab and the page to go white, and then I start seeing things appear randomly, and then finally the page loaded. But with uh, speculation rules, you get an instant load. You can get an instant load, and so that just feels kind of abrupt. And so the view transitions plugin implements the view transitions API for cross document navigations, so that when you do navigate, there's a fluid movement between pages, which provides a much better user experience. But it doesn't do anything at all in terms of LCP or raw performance metrics. So it's kind of it's in Performance Lab because it addresses that performance related issue of what happens when something's too fast.
Yes, yes. It is it can be jarring. It's kind of like a modern day Bezier curve.
And I'll actually jump down to that so we can look at that since we're talking about it. So let me zoom out here so we can see things side by side. So here is without view transitions, and you can see there's like a slight flash of white flicker. I mean, it's not really a flash, it's just flicker. But then with view transitions, you can see nice, smooth animation that just feels delightful.
Yeah, it's
And that
friendly.
also is also the case for when you're navigating back and forward as well. With the back forward cache, you can see before and after with the plugin disabled and enabled. You can see you get the same experience. So it's not limited to just link clicks, but it also improves the experience for navigating um, back and forward. And but looking at speculation rules, the without speculation rules in core, this is the experience you'd get in um, before WordPress 6.8. And then in WordPress 6.8, we added the conservative prefetch, and it shaves off about 50 milliseconds from the page load. And then, but then when you enable the moderate prefetch, then WordPress or the browser will start to load the page just when you mouse over the link, or now in just landing in Chromium, actually, there is a heuristic to start pre-fetching or pre-rendering links just when they're in the viewport,
Mm,
and that's coming out now. And then with this last one, it's going beyond the prefetch to also pre-render. So if I click play, you can see them all side by side, and you can see the difference.
yeah.
So you can see how with moderate pre-render, as soon as I click, I mean, and I'm cheating a little bit because I'm just waiting a second before I actually click, but um, regardless, you'll get a better user experience, or it'll load much faster when the browser has been given a head start. So that's yeah, speculative loading. And then let me go back up to image placeholders, because right after that I talked about modern image formats, and that is commonly touted as kind of the first thing that you would do maybe to improve performance in your on your web page. But in my testing, uh, I looked at uploading a JPEG, and then with this modern image formats plugin, it generated a AVIF version of that. And when the AVIF was 20% smaller than the JPEG, and so then you would logically think, okay, the LCP is going to be 20% better as well.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's only 2% better in my testing here. And that there's some more additional background information here about why that's the case. But it turns out that the browser being able to discover the image, the most important image, and to prioritize loading that sooner is much more impactful than just shaving off additional bytes in the image size.
Indeed. You know, I'll be honest, I mean, I should not be surprised, but you had mentioned that the LCP was one of the biggest problems, happening that, a lot of plugins were trying to address. And, oddly enough, I don't know how true this is to this day, but I will assume that it's probably still, relatively, correct. But, I guess the LCP has almost, well, I shouldn't say always, like at a sort of like 7 to 10 ratio, been an image challenge. So, I mean, all this is sort of like coming back together when people believe that reducing the size of an image is always going to get you faster results when it's actually much deeper than that.
Yeah. And so with modern image formats, that plugin, it changes the image format to have a better compression. But
Mhm,
there's a much better way to reduce the size of your images, and that is to have a more accurate sizes attribute for your responsive images, right?
mhm,
And in WordPress by default, it has, because it doesn't know how a page is laid out, it just has to have a default sizes attribute, which will work well on mobile. If an image is full width, it will select the right image based on the source set for the viewport size. But on desktop, very often you're going to have additional, white space on either side of the image, or you're going to have the image in the column. And so very often on desktop, you get a much, much larger sized image served to you than you actually need.
mhm,
And so this plugin is developed to address that. And first, the scope of it was to implement the new sizes the auto sizes, which just landed in the HTML spec.
mhm,
And for lazy loaded images, it will then rely on the layout of the page to the browser will start loading the image based on the layout, um, so that you don't have to fine tune the size attribute yourself. But for images that are in the viewport and the initial viewport, which are not lazy loaded, that is this plugin now is veering in that direction to help better have better default sizes attributes, and that is enabled by WordPress core now with the block-based themes, because now the entire layout of the page is structured in a way that there's information to a degree for the widths of certain uh, page elements. And if you have a columns block, then you know that based on the metadata in the block data, that this is a 25% width column followed by a 50% width column followed by a 25% column, for example. And so the in this example here, you can see I have two columns, one that's two-thirds the width and the other that's a third the width. And with Lighthouse, you'll often get this, audit that you need to properly size your images, and that's because the sizes attribute is not accurate. And so, but with this plugin, Enhanced Responsive Images, it will calculate a more accurate sizes attribute so that the browser can pick the right image from the source set.
Mhm.
And the LCP improvement here is dramatic, uh,
Wow.
25% improvement compared with just the 2% that we saw with using AVIF instead of JPEG. And that's because, the image is much smaller because it's a much smaller, many fewer pixels. So there's much less to transfer over the wire to begin with. And this was specifically on, this is on mobile. And then I think, or no, I think this was on, oh, I had it, yeah, I had the same layout on mobile and desktop. So yeah, 25% improvement. And generally, when running Lighthouse with the default theme in WordPress Core without any plugins active, you're going to get a Lighthouse score that's like really good
Mhm.
anyway. But and so one of the themes in my talk was just because you get a good Lighthouse score doesn't mean you're done, right? You should strive for excellence and not just good.
Yeah.
And a good LCP is up to 2.5 seconds, but what would a 1.5 second LCP or a 0.5 second LCP or a 0 second LCP be? I mean, that's also good, but it is way better user experience than just good. So
Yeah.
I wanted to emphasize that so that just if you see Lighthouse say you have a good performance score, that don't settle for that. Go
Yeah.
deep.
I actually remember that part of your talk 'cause I think there was, like, some chuckling and, but it's true, good is not always the best, basically, something along those lines, I remember. But no, you're absolutely correct, and, I'm gonna bring it back and not to interrupt, but I'm gonna bring it back to something that, Tammy Everett said, simply because you're within that 2.5-second threshold that's been, provided as guidance doesn't mean that it's the best, or it doesn't necessarily mean you're off to like the next, Jira ticket, simply because, your users may still not have the greatest experience at 2.5, even though it's been accepted just generally that 2.5 is good. Sometimes your users absolutely need like 1.5 or one flat. I don't know. But uh, I'm just supporting your statement, basically.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I guess there's more information here you can dig into, but then so that's using a better sizes attribute to serve the right number of pixels for a given image element
Mhm.
of the page. But going back to so WordPress core, it will, as of I think it was 6.5 or 6.6, it started to have some heuristics about prioritizing the image that it thinks is going to be the LCP element on the page. And if you have a simple page with the featured image, the hero image in your blog post, then WordPress core will add fetch priority high to that image so that it gets prioritized and loaded early so that the LCP is improved. But oftentimes things aren't so simple, and you'll have responsive design where you have a different image entirely on a mobile versus desktop.
Mhm.
In that case, WordPress will always be wrong for one segment of your visitors, either mobile or desktop. And other times, the image could be completely wrong that WordPress identifies, and it's never the LCP element. So, for example, in this gallery, if this is the first content in the page, it's this second image that is the largest because it's just a little bit taller.
Mhm.
But WordPress will add the fetch priority high attribute to the first sufficiently large image because it doesn't know, like, how it doesn't know if those other images are actually also in the viewport, and so it just has to make a guess that, okay, the first largest one is the one we pick. And but then you can see here on desktop, it's actually the second image that is the LCP element, and then on mobile, because the columns collapsed and because the viewport width is not as wide, the third image is much larger because it's on a row by itself, and so it's the third image on mobile that's the LCP element. So WordPress basically is stuck because it just it can't do the right thing ever with just adding fetch priority to the image tags themselves. And so this plugin called Image Prioritizer, which I speaking of traveling for conferences, I gave a talk all about this at WordCamp Asia in Manila back in uh, March, I think.
Mhm,
But I have a little high level overview here where the plugin will measure the um, the elements that are in the initial viewport. So, for example, it'll on desktop, it'll measure that, okay, these 3 images are in the viewport, both on mobile and desktop. This second one is the LCP on desktop. This third one is LCP on mobile. And then with that information, it'll collect that information for mobile visitors and tablet visitors and desktop visitors and store that information so that when it serves the page and that information is collected, it can render out preload links with fetch priority high for those specific images that were LCP and include some responsive media queries to say only preload this on mobile and only preload that on desktop. And this shows an even greater LCP improvement here on uh this one is on mobile, a 28% LCP improvement with a nice bump in the lighthouse score. And then on desktop, it actually improves it by over 50%, going from a 93 to a perfect 100 performance score, which, as we said, does perfect 100 does not mean perfect.
yeah, a
So,
great start, basically.
yeah, I mean, you're doing well if you're at 100, but don't give up. Don't settle for 100. So that addresses the responsive image problem and the problem of WordPress not correctly identifying what the largest image is, what the LCP image element is, specifically an image tag. But in WordPress and in the web overall, the LCP image may not be an image tag itself. It may be a background image for a div, for example, and that it's very common to have that. So if the LCP, if 42% of the time the LCP element is an image, then 26% of the time it's a div with probably a background image. And so here you can see that in WordPress core, if you have a cover block with a background image or a group block that has a background image applied and it's in the initial viewport, then it's going to be the LCP element. But being a CSS background image, there's no way physically for WordPress to add fetch priority high to that CSS property. But then also WordPress doesn't, th- being um, a cover block or a group block, there's no width or height dimensions to discover server side what that is going to be the LCP element. In this example here, we've got this cover block as the first content, and then several paragraphs of text followed by a gallery. And the logic in WordPress core is to add fetch priority high to the first sufficiently large image tag in the content. And here, that image tag, that first image tag is after these paragraphs of text, after this cover block. And it's, as you can see, way outside the viewport on desktop and mobile. And then WordPress core also will omit loading equals lazy from those first 3 images in the content, from the first 3 images in the content, and then only start adding loading equals lazy to images after that. So in this case, WordPress core does the absolutely worst thing, or the page is loaded in the worst possible way where the LCP image element is deprioritized in favor of this first image in the gallery that's not even shown on any viewport. And so similarly to what we saw with the responsive image prioritization, the way to add fetch priority high to such a CSS background image is to again use a preload link. And in this case, there's no need for uh, responsive breakpoint targeting because it's the same block. That's the LCP element on desktop and mobile. But here on mobile, again, a very large LCP improvement. And then on on desktop, I mean, it's the same. I'm measuring on desktop as well because it's the same page layout. So again, another very large performance improvement that this plugin provides. And that is those four are for there's the image placeholders, enhanced responsive images, modern image formats, and then image prioritizer. Those four are specifically targeting the images themselves. And then the other plugins that are in that I talked about are speculation rules, which are speculative loading that we talked about as well already. View transitions, we talked about that.
Yep.
And then this one, I gave it a terrible name. It's going to be renamed to, in GitHub, it's been renamed already, but it's called Instant Back Forward, I think. I can't even remember the name now. But yeah, I think it's called Instant Back Forward. This is related to speculation rules with the instant pre-render experience, but browsers the speculation rules API is brand new, but browsers have supported instant page loads for a long time now because of the back forward cache. But there's a bunch of reasons for why this back forward cache can be thwarted or disabled, and one of the big reasons is sending the cache control no store response header. And WordPress will do that by default when you're logged in, and many e-commerce plugins will also send that header to prevent pages like the shopping cart page from being cached
Mm.
and on a proxy. And then also there's also a privacy concern too with back forward cache, because if you're in the WordPress admin and you're working on something sensitive like maybe API keys or something, or maybe your new secret coupon code that you're going to use for your store, and you log out, if the back forward cache is enabled, then a malicious user could take over. If you're on a shared computer and you didn't lock your screen, and somebody else could come to that computer, hit the back button to go back into the admin and see what you had been working on. And so for that reason, WordPress core added this cache control no store to address not only the blocking of proxy caches from or proxies from caching such content, but also to prevent the browser from caching them so that there's that privacy concern addressed. But there is an alternative way to protect the privacy. Well, to prevent proxies from caching those responses, there's the private directive that is actually tailored for that purpose. And no store does that as well, but no store blocks this proxies and the browser from caching it, but private just blocks the um, proxies. And so then, but if so, then there's an alternative way though to achieve the privacy benefit that the no store directive has, and that is to use the page show event handler in JavaScript, which has a persisted property that says whether or not the page was restored with BF cache. And then, so this plugin here, it will check to see if you access the page with via BF cache, and then if your session state had changed, then it will reload the page so that the sensitive content is not accessible to you. But then there's also a new web platform feature called clear site data, the clear site data response header, which can do this without JavaScript at all, but at the moment, there's a Chromium bug that prevents it from being used because it can add a lot of latency to signing out of, or when it's sent, the browser has to do a bunch of work to delete a bunch of stuff, and that currently is not making it feasible to use. I think even GitHub wanted to use it, but they had to turn it off because of the additional latency when logging out.
Mm.
But once that
Uh,
lands, then that'll be a nice alternative to using JavaScript.
hey, listen, and anytime there's a very kind of like any alternative to using JavaScript that's going to agree with everyone, that's going to get support across the board, all for it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like the, I won't even quote like Harry Roberts had this quote around JavaScript once. I'll maybe I'll post it somewhere, but yeah, we just want to use just what's needed essentially, you
Yeah.
know. What I was going to say is for the folks who are watching, I know this was a relatively detailed blog post because I remember I was reading it. I was like, man, this guy really put in some work here, you know. Um, but yeah, the entirety of the blog post is certainly out there for everyone to read. Weston posted it in the chat, and I'll make sure to put that in the notes as well. Now, what I was gonna do actually is I mean, after we've gone through, is there another one you'd want to sort of like highlight in terms of like a significant improvement, like we'd seen it with some of the LCP figures?
Well, just around BF cache, another benefit of that is when a page is stored in BF cache, the whole state of the page is stored, not just the HTML. So it's important because you may have like a JavaScript. Speaking of JavaScript, a JavaScript built UI, and if you have a form field in that UI and you've entered content in there and you navigate away from that page, and if BF cache is not enabled, then hitting back to go where you had entered that content, it could be lost without BF cache because the page state is destroyed.
Yeah.
So that's another reason to invest in BF cache. But this is something else that just landed in core for the 6.9 release, and that is this adding fetch priority high to, I mean, fetch priority low actually to script modules. And one thing that is new in WordPress is called the interactivity API. Again,
Mhm.
speaking of JavaScript, where you have an image on the page that is a lightbox, has a
Mhm.
lightbox functionality, or you have the mobile nav menu that expands when you tap on it. Those require interactivity. Those require JavaScript to. Well, they don't actually now because you can use popover and dialogue and these things. But at the moment, they're using JavaScript. The interactivity API was introduced as a way to have a standard way of adding those interactive features to pages in WordPress, and they're using Preact as the framework under the hood. But one of the main principles of the interactivity API was server-side rendering, and everything should be served in the initial HTML so that there's no need to execute JavaScript when the page loads and or as the page is loading. And so um, they like if you have the image block with this module, it will by default it'll print that script module in the head of the page. And the thinking was, oh, script modules, they have a defer behavior by default, right? So they don't render block. So there's no problem to having them up there because, well, they'll be discovered earlier and they don't block anything anyway. So why not? Well, it turns out that if you have uh, a script module will load with a high fetch priority by default. And if you have that script module in the head, then it's going to compete with the LCP element resource image resource, for example. So um, having that script module there hurt your LCP, even though it's not blocking the rendering of the page. And so I did a whole blog post about that, and then but all that to say, just by adding fetch priority low to these script modules, you can improve LCP by, say, 9% because the browser isn't having to the LCP element image and the script module aren't competing for the network
Mhm.
download, and the script module isn't even needed at all as the page is loading. It's not in the critical rendering path. So by deprioritizing that is a nice easy way that there's no user, no option that a user needs to turn on for this. It just does it by default because it's the best practice.
Oh, wow.
And then there's
Mm.
other things here about like inlining CSS and minifying CSS and the improvements to LCP for just a page of text, no, where the image is not the LCP element. By eliminating those render blocking style sheets, you can
Mhm.
see a huge improvement as well, and like a 36% reduction in LCP, 44% on here on a slow 3G connection. And in this case, this was like loading the sample page in WordPress where it's just, yeah, again, just text. And with that, when us on a simulated low 3G connection, the LCP is poor at a 4.3 second load time.
Mhm.
But then by inlining and minifying the CSS, then it goes to a 2.38 seconds. So that's an example. I think the only example I showed that it was actually a bad LCP or poor LCP that was improved to be a good one. So this is something else that I'm hoping will land in 6.9, WordPress 6.9.
Wow. Wow. So this was essentially a lot of your research that you brought out to WordCamp US and sort of like highlighted what is actually now or going to be possible in this particular case in WordPress.
That's right.
Um, you know, recently, Todd, as well in the last stream, you'd mentioned that he had seen over the last couple years, at least, a surge of interest around performance. In your experience at WordCamps and whatnot, have you seen that sort of translate as well? Are people very curious about how they can improve their performance on the WordPress platform?
Yes. I think though the interest may be a bit less now than maybe a couple of years ago when Google search first
Mm,
talked about Core Web Vitals being a ranking factor, and it wasn't clear just how much of a ranking factor it was. So I think there was a lot of fear um, that their Google search ranking is gonna tank because of bad LCP. So I think that was unfounded, that fear. So I think now it's becoming maybe more um, well grounded and having a good user experience as being the driving force and not being penalized by Google. I think it's a better motivation.
right, right. It was basically, you know, panic-driven performance development.
That's right. Yeah.
Something along those lines. Now, in your guesstimation, as we sort of, wrap things up, what do you see coming? You said 6.9 is going to drop soon, but just even beyond that, like, is there anything that's in development as we speak that you're soon to sort of discuss and maybe even share benchmarks?
Well, the that image prioritizer plugin I was talking about, that is still very much in the development stage, and it is not ready for core merge, but the image prioritizer plugin is a extension of this underlying optimization detective framework that
Mhm.
does the work of the measuring of the elements on the page and storing them and then providing a way for you to use them to apply optimizations. And so another example of an extension of optimization detective is the embed optimizer plugin, which will lazy load embeds that aren't in the initial viewport, and then also to reserve space for embeds that change their height when they do load so that layout shift is reduced. But with this framework, there's many other opportunities for optimizations to be done automatically without any user interaction. So another one that I've been looking at is applying content visibility styles automatically so that the browser doesn't have to work on rendering and laying out content that isn't even on the page yet. And so these things are I was working a lot on these over the past couple of years, and then with the job change, I had to refocus for a while. And then now, yeah, after the 6.9 release, I'm hoping to really dig back into that deeply and share more exciting performance improvements that are possible with that. And then, yeah, if you install the Performance Lab plugin, then you'll be the first to know about the availability.
Now, someone's been paying close attention to your every word today, and they may still have a few questions, or they've been reading your blog post during the stream and they have some questions. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably Blue Sky, LinkedIn, or I mean, on my blog, weston.ruter.net, you can find links to all my social media channels. And then there's also a contact form there that you can contact me directly. But better to reach out in public if you can.
Absolutely. And the other one I was actually going to mention, and it's not come up during our conversation. I used to hang around in there, not as much these days, but I like to poke my head in from time to time. And that's the WordPress Core Performance Slack. And it's still active, right?
Yep, it's still active. We have meetings there every Tuesday. And yeah, I'm always on there and I get pinged for every message. So I'll definitely see your message there. So if it's related to WordPress, core or some fundamental part of the WordPress ecosystem related performance, that's a great place. I'm also in the web performance Slack uh, organization or organization,
No, it's never Slack. Slack is it.
which you are too. So
Yes, yes,
we
yes.
can discuss this stuff.
I'll make sure to post the information to the WordPress performance Slack as well, simply because, and again, I remember like this was always a discussion. Like a lot of the work is done in the public, so people can actually watch or see some of the discussions or read, pardon me, the discussions that are taking place, concerns, X, Y, and Z. So that's something pretty cool. Weston, any parting words, as we sort of wrap things up? But anything work-wise, like anything even at WPE that you want to mention that's taking place? I don't know. Like you would tell me.
No, I mean, I'm brand new, so
Oh,
still
like you.
getting my feet wet.
Sorry.
And I'm,
Yeah.
but I'm looking forward to the the work that we're going to be able to do to make the web better for everybody.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it too. And the door is always open to any kind of like new updates that you want to share and talk about. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Thank you very much for your time today. If again you're part of the WordPress ecosystem and you want to make your your site faster, your app, whatever it might be, we got a lot of information today. Again, the blog post is there. You'll be able to read it at your own pace and look at some of the information, everything that's been committed to the performance plugin, and you'll be able to use. You'll be able to ping Weston if you have any questions about it. And beyond that, folks, once again, want to thank you for your time today. I announced that the Speedy '08 has been published. So the one with Todd Gardner, you can go check that out. And obviously some of the other videos that are available for you to watch. And beyond that, again, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And I'll make the announcement of who's going to be with us tomorrow. All right. Have yourself a great day.